Good morning and welcome. My name is Dustin Avey, and I serve as the chair of the Olathe Chamber of Commerce Business to Government Advocacy Committee. And it's my honor to moderate today's forum, and we appreciate both of you being here today. The Johnson County Public Policy Council, comprised of 10 chambers of commerce serving Johnson County, developed today's questions, focusing on business and community issues. We will start with brief 3 minutes opening statements by each candidate, followed by question and answer, where candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer the question. At the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Due to time constraints, there will be no follow-up questions, formal rebuttal time, or audience participation. Please note the candidate's speaking order has been randomly determined before the forum began and will rotate throughout the program. Our first forum is for House District 49. House District 49 covers Olathe and Overland Park, stretching from 127th Street to 159th South, and bordered on the west by Black Bob, Summertree Lane, Merlin, and on the east of Flum and a portion of Quivira. Now I'd like to introduce the candidates in alphabetical order. First, Democrat candidate Brad Boyd. Democrat candidate Brad Boyd grew up learning about public service from his grandmother, Illinois State Representative LaVonna Jones, who introduced him to community organizing and electoral campaigns in Chicago, Illinois. After moving from Chicago to Wichita, Kansas, and then to Olathe, Kansas, Brad has continued to serve his community and organize for progressive causes. In addition to being an Olathe school board member, Brad is also the director of organizing for Prairie Roots. He currently resides in Olathe, Kansas with his wife Maisha and their 4 children. Republican candidate Kristen Clark. Kristen grew up in Olathe and has been a resident of Olathe for over 3 decades. She attended Olathe schools and holds a degree as a registered nurse. She is active in the Olathe Public Schools, serving on the Parent Advisory Board and Site Council, and has been in leadership of the PTA. Kristen is married to her husband, Chris, who is an Air Force veteran. They have 4 boys, and they also have 2 dogs. The Clarks attend Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church. In her free time, Kristen is an avid runner and enjoys volunteering, both for her church on a number of mission trips, as well as with Great Plains SPCA and Mission Southside. Now we'll start with opening statements. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to present opening statements. The first opening statement will be by Kristen.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I actually will be an Olathe resident for 31 years coming this November. I do hold my degree as a registered nurse, and my reason for running for this race is truly my children. When the world shut down almost 3.5 years ago, nobody had any idea about how to educate and how to do all the things at home. And at the time, my oldest was a 5th grader, which is when we learned Kansas history, and he was about ready to miss out on that because the pandemic hit. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. We did math every day. We did Kansas history every day. And before I knew it, I had 15 to 17 5th graders sitting around my kitchen table learning about Kansas history, and it lit something up inside of me that made me realize how vitally important it is for our government and for the education of our children to learn Kansas history. So I started reaching out to different legislators, and we had multiple Zoom meetings, which is how we did things, when everything was shut down, and it was a wonderful opportunity to get to see the inner workings of what goes on at Topeka. I've got 3 major issues that, of course, we want to take care of. We want to work on inflation. There's absolutely no reason why I should be spending as much money at the grocery store as I am. And as a family of 6, we are feeling that pain. As a registered nurse, I will always advocate for my patients and for the children as well. So I really want to see sustainable health care. And then, of course, education. Having 4 children, 3 of which are in the district, it is very important that we have education at the forefront of everything that we do.
Very good. Thank you for that introduction, Kristen. Brad?
Good morning. I want to thank the Johnson County Public Policy Council for hosting this forum. Thank you to the Olathe Chamber for taking on the burden of having us get together and ask us these questions. I look forward to this opportunity. It's vitally important that Kristen and I have a chance to present our case to the public at every chance we get. So to make sure that they are making an informed decision. So thank you for hosting this forum this morning. As Dustin stated, I am Brad, and I live in Olathe with my family, my wife, and my 4 children. And we have had the incredible honor of calling Olathe home for the last number of years, and it has truly been the best decision we made as a family. We moved to Olathe for the schools. Living in a neighboring district, we realized that the quality of education that we found in Olathe was second to none. So, as a kid, I grew up in Chicago, as Dustin mentioned, but my grandmother, who was my guardian, was a state representative for 30 years. So I got to see her go to work every single day to work on behalf of folks who couldn't necessarily work and advocate for themselves. And she showed me what it was like to be a servant leader. She instilled in me this vital idea, this vital quality of community service, of public service. And that's what has led me on the path that I traveled as an adult. After college, my wife and I, we moved to Wichita, Kansas, where her family was stationed at. Her father was in the Air Force. And I became a police officer. Became a police officer because, again, my grandmother, and you'll hear a theme for me, my grandmother instilled in us this idea of giving back to one's community. And the way that I chose to give back as a fresh person, as a young man out of college, was to join the police force. And I was a police officer for almost 8 years. Really enjoyed the job. Built some incredible relationships. I love talking to people. In that situation, it was unfortunately talking to a lot of people in some of the worst situations that they faced in their lives. But I helped them through that. I helped them walk them through some of those processes. And when I left the department, I left as a decorated field training officer, which I received a couple medals for action taken in line of duty. And again, for me, it all went back to this idea of service. So when we moved our family to Olathe, outside of being a PTO dad, a watchdog dad, serving on the site council, I immediately began to find ways to plug in and get involved in my community. And I saw that there was a seat open on my local school board here in Olathe, and I decided to run for that seat in 2019. I ran for that seat, I won that seat, and I've been serving on the Olathe School Board since 2020. I am currently the Vice President of our Olathe School Board, and as a board officer, there are additional responsibilities that I hold, but I really enjoy the pleasure and the opportunity to serve my community. I'm getting the time warning, so I'm going to stop and look forward to the questions.
Very good. Thank you both. That's very well done, and thank you for giving us the reasons why you're running on this race. We will now move into question and answer. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes each to respond, and the speaking order will rotate with each question. So I think, Brad, we're going to start with you on this first question. What are your views on state tax policy, being as specific as you can?
Yeah, so when it comes to state tax policy, I believe our policy has to be fair, balanced, sustainable, and predictable. Businesses need that predictability so they can plan both short-term and long-term. Our families need that sustainability so they know how much they're paying in their taxes. And I believe that we're at a point right now where with over $1.5 billion in surplus, we need to start returning some of that money back to Kansans. And it's their money, we shouldn't be holding on to it. We need to cut taxes so our families can get some of the relief. Property taxes, we need to provide property tax relief. The state has the money to do that. They haven't. Unfortunately, my opponent doesn't believe that. But I believe that we should return over $1.5 billion back to Kansas because it's their money, it's not ours.
Kristen?
Yeah, when setting tax policy, lawmakers should be thinking about the burden on homeowners, families, businesses, and the like. The elimination of the food sales tax was long overdue, and I'm very thankful that we're seeing that come to fruition. I would advocate for additional tax reductions, as that would continue to help our homeowners, families, and our businesses, especially those small businesses, which we do have quite a few in District 49. Particularly during this time of inflation, it's very important for us to be looking at that surplus and how do we get that back to the people of District 49 and Kansans in general. Looking at sustainable state policy and taxation issues is very, very important, and I think it's something that we should be talking about.
Thank you both. Question number 2, and this will go to Kristen. Obviously, both of you are very passionate about education. What are your views on K-12 education funding and accessibility?
I strongly support ensuring our schools remain well-funded and fully funded, including the special needs sector, which has not been fully funded to this point. Having a student who is in that special needs demographic, it is very important that we take care of our teachers and all of our staff, and as well as looking into that special needs sector. Parents are wisely insisting that the funding be directed towards those classrooms and towards those teachers. I very much advocate on behalf of this. Likewise, the best way to improve student outcomes is by involving our parents every step of the way. There is no perfect private school. There is no perfect public school. There is no perfect homeschool. There is, however, a parent who will advocate on behalf of their children, and what that looks like, I fully support.
Thank you, Kristen. Brad?
Yeah, so I believe our strong public schools are the foundation of a safe and strong community. They are the foundation of safe, strong, and local economies. And we have to continue to make an investment in our public education system. I'll tell you right now in Olathe, the current state leadership in Topeka, we are shorted between $16 and $20 million every single year for special education. So that means we have to take $16 to $20 million from our general education budget to supplant that loss in that funding that the state isn't funding. I'll tell you that the current leadership in Topeka, they've been in control for over 30 years. And we have seen this story over and over again from failed tax plans, failed tax experiments. We don't need to keep going down this road. We know what works. We need to continue investing in public education. And they are truly our future. And again, it's the bedrock of a safe and strong local economy.
Perfect. Thank you both. Question number 3, I think, is something that probably all Johnson County chambers are very focused on, is really economic development issues. So Brad, let me start with you on this question. What types of economic development policy do you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
Yeah, I believe if we are to be competitive as a state, we have to attract large businesses to our state, and that will require tax incentives. We just saw the governor's office announce the Panasonic deal using the Apex deal. I support that. I believe in that. I do believe, though, we need to make sure that we have clawbacks and oversight to make sure that Kansas aren't on the hook for multi-billions of dollars, and that the way that the program is designed, Kansas are really reaping the benefits from those tax incentives, because again, it's their tax dollars that we're using to provide those incentives. It's only fair that we ask that Kansas benefit from that. So I fully support EcoDevo, as long as there are clawbacks and oversight to make sure that Kansas are reaping those benefits.
Thank you, Kristen.
Here in Kansas City, we know very well how important it is for Kansas to be economically competitive with our neighbors. We must pursue policies that encourage businesses to grow. So, supporting sustainable tax is policies and removing regulations that inhibit that economic growth is imperative.
Thank you both. Question number 4, I think it's a major issue not only in Kansas but probably across the country, is really the workforce. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce? Kristen, start with you.
Yeah, the first thing we have to do is ensure that we have policies in place which encourage people to stay in Kansas and to build a life here. Kansas is a fantastic place to live. My parents moved here when I was 6 from the city of Houston, Texas, simply because of how wonderful it was to work here. My dad started a business here and then retired as well from here. So I think it's very, very important to attract families and businesses to grow here, and especially that small business sector is very important to Kansas.
Right. Yeah, I think when we start talking about workforce development, we have to start with the greatest asset we have, which is our public school system. We have to keep investing in that. We have to make sure that it's properly and adequately funded. But the other thing that we need to do, and we do a really good job in Olathe, is building these public-private partnerships. I can imagine as a business owner having first dibs on an employee or a group of employees, bringing them in early, exposing them to your business, training them, and providing steps that they can take to be after graduation, come and be a part of your organization is a huge incentive. And I think we need to expand that public-private partnership. And again, we do a really good job in Olathe of doing that. There is some expansion, but it starts with investing in our public education system.
Thank you both. Next question, I think this probably will relate to both of you at some point, given the number of kids that you both have, but it's really related to just secondary education opportunities and obviously the costs associated with what that is. Brad, we'll start with you on this question. What are your views on the state's role with respect to ensuring access and affordability of post-secondary education?
Yeah, so this is, as you mentioned, I do have 4 children, and whatever path they decide to go, I hope that my wife and I are in a position to fully support them. But from a state's perspective, we first need to start with making sure that we are taking advantage of our community colleges. I know right now in Olathe high school kids are taking college classes at our local community college, and we need to build upon that to make it easier for families to afford that, biting off small chunks of the apple at a time. The other idea, maybe trade schools, maybe college isn't the right decision for every kid. We need to expand those options and meet kids where they are to make sure that they are, once they graduate high school, they are able to contribute and however they want to contribute to our economy.
Yeah, also having 4 children, I very much am aware of how expensive post-secondary education can be. And I think it's very important that whatever avenue our children take, whether they go into the trades, they go to a 4-year university, or they decide to just become entrepreneurs, I think that's an avenue that we need to definitely take a look at. We need to make sure that it's affordable for our families as well, for those 4-year universities and for those community colleges. Brad made mention to how our high schools actually have a partnership with Johnson County Community College where they can take college courses while also in high school, and that is an incredible asset. I myself did that and was able to graduate from college early. So it's very encouraging that even when I graduated high school back in 2004 that program has continued within our school district. And I believe that Johnson County Community College has also partnered with several private schools to make that possible as well.
Perfect, thank you both. So maybe shifting gears a little bit, I mean, obviously I think the last 2 years have been somewhat unprecedented in our country's history. And I guess looking backwards, and then obviously we take lessons from what we've experienced over time. Kristen, I'll start with you on this question. What do you believe are the takeaways for state lawmakers should be from the COVID-19 pandemic experience?
Sure. Obviously it was unprecedented times. Nobody saw a pandemic coming down the pipe like we did. Mandates and lockdowns and closures of schools, we now know was not the right answer. When you know better, you do better. I was glad to see that legislature took action to ensure that there's checks and balances in place. Heaven forbid anything like this ever happen again. But again, when you know better, you have the ability to do better.
Good.
Yeah, so I think I have a unique perspective here. I had a chance to, again, serve on the school board in a challenging time, a time of crisis, a time that no one knew what was coming. I think, lawmakers should take away that, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. I think that we should, one, make sure that, we are realizing that our school boards and our school districts, our county health boards, they are the local body that's in control of that, and we shouldn't be overstepping our boundaries on that and trying to dictate to schools what they should and shouldn't do. But the other thing I think I would be remiss if I didn't say is that during the pandemic, folks didn't know what was happening, and leaders had to make decisions with the information that they had available. I think it's easy to play armchair quarterback after the fact, but sit in that seat with families believing in you, families relying on you, families trusting you. You have to make the best decision that you can to do the most good at the time and the least amount of harm. And I think as a school board member, as our board, we did that every month, making decisions that always put kids first, making decisions to prioritize people over politics and prioritize their health. And I would never apologize for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you both. So really along those same lines with respect to healthcare, and again, Brad, we'll start with you on this question. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion?
Yeah, so healthcare, for me, it's a heart and a mind issue. I think right now, I mentioned earlier, we have over $1.5 billion in a surplus. We need to provide tax cuts for over-the-counter medication. We need to provide tax cuts for feminine and hygiene products. So that's just one piece of it. Healthcare, I believe, is a right. If we as a state you mentioned workforce development and building the workforce, what's better than making sure that the workforce we have now is healthy? So making sure that we have healthy, productive workers is vital and essential to our economy. I believe that we should expand Medicaid. We are leaving over hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. So when I say it's a heart and a mind issue, it makes sense morally and it also makes sense financially. It is a financial, responsible policy to expand Medicaid.
Yeah, so I have a slightly different perspective on that. As a former nurse, I'm actually quite pleased that the legislation has taken positive steps to expand access to affordable health care. In terms of Medicaid expansion, with the exemption of those in the special needs sector that automatically get 100% Medicaid, I think that Medicaid expansion needs to be looked at much like we do unemployment. There needs to be metrics in place so that it is a hand out and not a hand up. What those metrics look like, I hope we have an ability to have a discussion on. That way we are making sure that we are taking care of the people that vitally need it, but that they are also actively seeking employment within our workforce to be able to get their own insurance and alleviate that burden on the state. We also need to make sure that it is fiscally responsible for our doctors, our nurses, and our hospitals. And the way that Medicaid expansion is written currently, it would be a huge detriment to a lot of the medical facilities.
Thank you both for your response to that. So really last question before we get into closing statements, and this is really kind of how all levels of government interact. So I think this is going to be Kristen's question. How control over decision-making is divided among the state legislature and local governments, including school boards, on issues such as taxation, economic development, and education has been a matter of debate. What are your views on this issue?
Thank you. It's a great question. Local control is very important to Olathe and Blue Valley school districts, and I full-heartedly believe that needs to continue. I support allowing local jurisdictions to be able to make the most of our tax money and those economic decisions as well. It's one thing to sit in legislation and make the policies, but we also need to realize that those policies trickle into the local municipalities, and we need to work alongside with them.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, as a school board member, there is local control is important. I believe our board is a duly elected board. Our community has elected those folks to make decisions that affect their children, and we should trust the folks that elect them and trust those folks that are elected to do their job. I do believe that we need to be accessible, transparent, and accountable to those voters. So again, local control is paramount, and where there is an issue or there is a gap, we need to work together to make sure that we're making decisions to put people over politics.
Yeah, thank you both for that, and I think that leads us into our closing statements. So candidates will have 2 minutes each to present closing statements. Please be sure to highlight what most distinguishes you from your opponent. And Brad, it's your turn on this one.
Yeah. Again, just thanks for providing this opportunity to talk to voters directly for Kristen and I to distinguish ourselves from each other. I think you heard this morning a few areas of difference, and I don't think those differences could be any starker. I believe if we are to transform our state into the state we want to be, I believe that I'm the person to go to Topeka to represent the 49th district. I believe Kristen is out of touch with the district. We saw in August 2nd, 67% of the district voted to protect our rights. 67% of the district voted to protect women's choice. Kristen didn't agree with that. I do. I think, and I will listen to the district. I will listen to that 67%. And say it's an end issue, full stop. I don't know if Kristen will do that. I think there are opportunities for us in the state of Kansas to grow and to protect our rights, but also transform our state to the state that we want it to be. We have to continue to invest in our education system, putting our families first. We have to continue to provide, to invest in eco-devo opportunities, making sure that there are clawbacks and oversight in place. To ultimately protect and provide access and opportunities to the residents of District 49. So I believe I'm the right person for the seat at the right time, and I would appreciate the support on November 8th.
Thank you. Brad is correct. There are quite a few differences between the two of us, but that's what makes our democracy great. Brad pointed out that yes, in fact, our district did speak very loud and clear regarding the value of them both amendment. And I would like to take a moment to clarify, if I may, Brad, but I come from a different perspective. Not only am I a registered nurse by trade, but I was actually adopted, and my adoption is the product of an unplanned circumstance. That being said, I also have 4 babies here on earth and 6 in heaven, one of which nearly took my life, so I have a very different perspective on these things. However, the vote was made the way it was, and I had a gut feeling that Kansas would stay the way they did, but I had to go with my personal convictions and my personal beliefs. In terms of will I listen to the district? Absolutely. I support all women in all places where they are at. And I think that that is something that is very vital. Having lived here for nearly 31 years, I'm very pleased to know quite a few people who are ready to see inflation tackled. I'm in the same boat that all of you are. I pay the bills, and high prices are just astronomical right now and really hurting families and businesses. I believe that our government needs to work for us now more than ever. We need citizen legislature who's committed to protecting our freedoms. And at the end of the day, I have 4 children. They are our future. I have to promote student-focused education that allows parents' involvement at all times. I do want to take a moment also to thank the Chamber for this opportunity. It was wonderful. You were a fantastic moderator for your first time out, so thank you very much. And I do hope that you can vote for me on November 8th.
Very good. Kristen, Brad, thank you very much for taking the time this morning to have this forum. That concludes our forum for the House District number 49. On behalf of the Olathe Chamber of Commerce, thank you to everyone for taking advantage of this important opportunity to learn about the candidates. For more information about the candidates, videos of these and other candidate forums and advanced voting details, visit www.votejoco.com. And please share this voter resource with your colleagues, family, and friends. With that, thank you again for attending, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.